This video is part 8 of my Avengers 4 fanfiction, which I'm calling Watched by Death. If this is the first video of mine you've encountered, you may want to check out the previous parts of this fanfic before coming back to this video. We start off over a regular apartment complex, and we see the Bifrost descend a distance away. We then see the inside of a microwave as the door opened up and we see a woman we know as Jane Foster as she extracted the food that was being microwaved. Popcorn's ready. Jane walked into the living room where a man was sitting waiting for her. So what do you think the surprise twist will be? The man asked. Let's just say I've reached the point in my life where nothing will surprise me, Jane replied. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Jane answered it and gasped, Captain America, what are you doing here? I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, Steve said, but we need your help. Well, I was just about to watch a movie, Jane said. What movie? Steve asked. The High Priestess, came the man's response. I'll have to put it on the list, Steve said, doing just that. How familiar are you with quantum mechanics? I have a surface-level understanding of the field, Jane said, as she began to turn around. That's actually what my degree is in, the man said. Do you have an interest in visiting Asgard? Steve said. There is a project underway that involves a quantum tunnel. What exactly is this project? Jane demanded. And is Thor involved? Well, Thor is my ride, Steve said as Thor came into view. Yeah, well, my boyfriend and I, Jane said, putting an emphasis on the word boyfriend, have been planning movie night for a couple weeks now. Jane, this project has the potential to bring back those who perished in the decimation, Thor said. One of those victims was a dear friend and ally of mine. Ever since I learned of her dusting, I haven't been able to get over her. Do I know this person? Jane asked. You've met her, Thor said. You're talking about bringing people back, the man said. Yeah, Jane said. People who've turned to dust can't be brought back. I am Groot, said a voice as Groot came into view. He was brought back, Thor said. You're bluffing, Jane said. I was there in Wakanda, Steve said. He's not bluffing. We then cut to Tony Stark, walking down a hallway, carrying Captain America's old shield, just as Captain America appeared, flanked by Jane Foster and her boyfriend, Thor walking distantly in the background. Mr. Stark, I've brought you some help, Steve said, quietly gasping when he saw the shield. Stark exhaled, and then decided to hand Cap the shield, but he did not let go. Promise me that if we bring your friend back, I get one punch. Steve hesitated. With your bare hand, Steve said. No suit of armor. Deal, Stark said, as he let the shield go, allowing it to finally return to Captain America's possession. What was that about? The man asked. Stark and I had a terrible argument regarding a friend of mine, Steve told him. Yeah, Stark said, but there are plenty of people I'd love to bring back. You must be Dr. Jane Foster, he added, shaking her hand. Astrophysicist, she replied. And you are? Stark said, turning to her boyfriend. Dr. Donald Blake, he said, expert in quantum mechanics. Oh good, Stark gasped. The project I'm dealing with deals with the quantum realm. Dr. Hank Pym left a bunch of notes that I'm struggling to understand. That's what I'm here for. We then cut to the lab where the quantum tunnel is as Stark set up holograms near the tunnel, and he began explaining what the tunnel was. In the background, we see Scott Lang, Steve Rogers, and Thor standing in the background. Do either of you understand anything they're talking about? Steve asked. No, Scott said. I wish, Thor said. Captain Marvel soon joined them. The team is finally together, she commented. Is this part of the winning path against Thanos? Steve asked. Yes, Marvel said. However, they're going to need more hands on deck than they have right now. So, even if we manage to lock onto their souls, Jean was saying, will their bodies be there as well? No, Captain Marvel said, approaching them. You'll have to generate their bodies manually. Looks like we need Helen Cho, Stark said. Can she generate a body from scratch? Jane asked skeptically. I'm confident she can, Thor said. In fact, I know someone who was created from a ritual. We then cut to Serena, who was standing in front of a statue of Frigga, which was next to the edge of the wall, across from a similar statue of Odin. The two statues were looking at each other, situated next to the cliff, overlooking the scene where Odin died. Serena herself stood there, frozen in place, her hands trembling. After a time, Thor appeared and asked, "Feeling all right?" Serena gasped. She remained frozen, petrified, her hands no longer trembling. "Whatever memory you suddenly regained," Thor said, "I promise I won't get mad." "I killed her," Serena blustered out. "I killed your mother." "No, you didn't," Thor said simply. "I directed the monster that ultimately killed her, just to spite him," Serena exclaimed, pointing at the statue of Odin. "By telling him to take the stairs to the left?" Thor suggested. Observing her shocked face, Thor continued, "Serena, I saw the surveillance footage of Loki saying that before I went down to free him from his cell. It was the only reason I was willing to tell him that I'd kill him if he betrayed me." "Were you willing to kill him?" Serena asked. "Apparently not," Thor said, "because he would go on to betray me by faking his death and impersonating Odin for a couple years, and I did not kill him. I suspect that killing him was not what she would have wanted, regardless of the circumstances." "Frigga would have been grateful that Loki came to rescue Asgard's people from Hela," Thor continued, "and she'll definitely be proud of you and what you did for Asgard." Partially smiling, Serena said, "You truly do see me and Loki as different people, don't you?" "There's a tiny part of me that suspects that you're still my brother, having faked his death again, and are now masquerading as a woman to disguise himself," Thor said. "All jokes aside, I don't know much about the blood restoration ritual. Hell, I'm still shocked that Loki managed to pull it off. But I do know this much. While the core sense of consciousness you have was once owned by Loki, not to mention his memories, skills, and powers," Thor said, "the ritual still allows the dying person's personality to be purged, essentially allowing his or her successor to begin life with a clean slate, generating a body for that new individual." "I suppose there's some truth to that," Serena said. "There is something else," Thor said. "The more I recall seeing Loki lying there as the ship was being destroyed, the more I get the feeling that you may have been present, comforting Loki in his final seconds." "I don't remember the ship blowing up," Serena said. "I do remember feeling a metal gauntlet around my neck as I looked at a snarling purple face, one that strikes me as almost sadistic. I was struggling until I felt a snap and a rush of blood flowing in all the wrong places. I was blackening out, felt a little bit of motion around me before I felt nothing at all," Serena said. "No sensation, no knowledge, nothing. Then I began to feeling a bunch of fluff in strange ways. There was a sense of blackness because once I felt solid, I was blinded by light. I had no clue what was going on," Serena continued. "Didn't perceive the concept of a name, just a bunch of green light. Then I looked down, saw a bunch of light bluish pink, and instinctively created the illusion of being clothed." "Did not need to know that last part," Thor said. "I heard and processed what hearing was," Serena continued. "People screaming and a bunch of commotion. Hindsight, I know that decimation was underway. There is a team of scientists looking into undoing the decimation," Thor said. "They're going to need to find a way to generate bodies for the people they bring back. Since your body was generated from scratch, they would at least like to speak with you." We cut to the lab, where the scientists had set up 2 medical beds. Tony Stark and Donald Blake stood next to one, while Jane Foster and a woman called Helen Cho stood next to another. Now, people turning to dust out of nowhere seemingly violates the known laws of science, especially if there are people near them who don't, Stark said. Now, because of the nature in which they vanished, and the fact that it happened years ago, we have no way of putting their bodies back together. We basically have to recreate their bodies from scratch. Now, because your body came into its own from scratch, Stark continued, we were hoping to emulate this. However, unlike with the decimation, we have no data as to the forces behind this. Vision is one case study. So, we were hoping to examine you for some insight as to how this might work. It could be with me and Dr. Blake, or it could be with Dr. Cho and Padme Amidala. I'll take my chances with them, Mr. Stark, Serena said. Oh, thank God, Stark said. I can focus on mechanics. Turning to Thor, he added, Why did you think she would go with us? I had a few lingering questions about her, Thor answered. At that moment, Captain America walked in, followed closely by Shuri. Oh good, Stark said. Reinforcements arrived. Who are you talking about? Shuri asked. You, Stark said. We need your expertise in neuroscience. Speaking of which, where's Dr. Banner? He decided to undergo the procedure, Shuri said. Tell me he's in good hands, Tony said. He is, Shuri insisted. However, M'Baku is going to have my head if he discovers I'm here. Well, Blake said. While the other ladies are examining Eve over there, allow Mr. Stark and I to get you caught up. Hey Thor, Jane called. You may want to come over here. For what? Thor asked. We just ran a DNA test on Serena, and she's half frost giant and half Asgardian, Jane said. What? Thor asked, dumbfounded. It's what the DNA test says, Joe insisted. Good to know. We then cut to a fast-forward sequence where we see the scientists in various poses as equipment was appended to the back of the quantum tunnel. We are told that 3 weeks have gone by before we are shown a gathering of the Avengers. So, we are just about ready to begin the process of bringing back the first person lost in the decimation, Jane said. Does anyone have any questions on how it works? What safety features do you have in place in case the procedure goes wrong? Steve asked. Stark and I have built a quantum computer capable of simulating the resurrection of a decimation victim, Dr. Blake said. If the computer suspects that something could go wrong, it will activate a failsafe and prevent the procedure. What does the system need in order to bring back someone? Thor asked. It's going to need the memory of someone who knew the person, Tony said. I perfected a technology that can scan someone's memories and form a cohesive model of what the individual was capable of. It's based off of Barth. Is it going to hone in on the person? Steve asked, and leave other memories alone? Yes, Tony replied. Trust me, Steve, there are parts of my mind I do not want Barth touching. So, any volunteers? I volunteer, Thor said, walking up to Stark. Good man, Stark responded. Getting mind probes, he admitted. Never tried it on an Asgardian before. Always a first. After the probes were attached, a screen flared up, and after a couple seconds, an image of Lady Sif appeared, along with basic stats about her. Thor, I should probably let you know about a thing called probability fields, Tony said. Suddenly, a banner over Sif said, unavailable. Thor was aghast. What exactly is going on? He growled. The probability fields are aligned in such a way that only a certain group of people are available for extraction, Dr. Blake said. At some point, they'll shift and a different group of individuals will be available. What we can do, Thor, is save Sif's information and monitor the quantum realm, Tony said. We can set an alert for you or begin the extraction immediately. I want to be there when she returns, Thor said. An alert then, Tony said. Do you think you could do it, Tony? Steve asked. I could try, Tony said, applying the notes to himself. Once he did, an image of Peter Parker appeared, and as with Sif, a list of attributes also appeared. However, a green banner appeared with the words available. Tony pressed the green button, and we could hear the machine powering up. Tony Stark was suddenly full of anxiety, wondering if the computer would predict a failure or worse, fail to predict one. However, he felt compelled to send everyone out of the room and throw some clothes into the chamber. The machine kept spinning for half an hour as Tony Stark continued to pace around, hoping beyond hope that the machine works. During that time, the other scientists continued to give updates on the logs they were reading. Genome generated, Cho said. Soul locked, Blake said. Brain structure outline mapped, Shuri said. Body generation commencing, Cho said. Brain generation commencing, Shuri said. Heartbeat detected, Cho said. Soul and mind are now interfacing with each other, Jane Foster said. He's conscious, Cho said, just as the noise finally dwindled down. This is it, Tony thought, as he realized that his protege might actually be alive again. 5 years after he turned to dust. After a couple minutes, Tony decided to knock. Who's there? Came a familiar voice. It's me, Tony said. Are you dressed yet? Yeah? Can I come in? Sure. His heart pounding, Tony cautiously opened the door to find Peter sitting there, dressed in the clothes Tony threw in there. Hey kid, Tony said. Mr. Stark, where am I? Peter asked. You're on Earth, Tony said. Norway, to be more specific. New Asgard, to be even more specific. Going up into space, fighting a purple monster, people turning to dust. I'm sorry to say this, but that actually did happen, Tony said. And you were the first person we had succeeded in bringing back, he added, pointing to the quantum tunnel. So what now? Peter asked. Opening the door and bringing in a hoverboard bed, Tony said, You are going to need to be taken to a rehabilitation center in Asgard. Your body should be capable of what your old one was, but it needs to build up to that. Tony helped Peter get onto the bed. As the bed was being taken out of the room, Peter remarked, I should have stayed on the bus. We then cut to a wooded area where we see Serena sitting on a log, looking down at a small creek. We see her manipulate the water for a couple minutes before we hear a foreboding voice. Is that sadness I sense in you, Serena? Thanos echoed. Though deep down, you're still the god of mischief. Your brother may be having you imagine a reality where he is actually your uncle. But you and I both know the reality of who you truly are. Thanos finally appeared to her, prompting Serena to draw an eldritch sword while instinctively caressing her neck. She simply stared at Thanos, petrified. I have no desire to fight, Thanos said. I have no wish to hurt you. You snapped my neck, Serena said. And now it is far too pretty for me to do it again, Thanos said. Let's be honest, Serena said. Had I returned as a god of mischief, let's say I called myself Zero, you would have no problem blasting me where I stand now. It's probably because you would not be reminding me of my favorite daughter Gamora, Thanos said. Sitting down in front of Serena, he continued, With the Soul Stone, I could bring back any person I please, except for Gamora. What would happen if you tried to bring her back? Serena asked. I'll likely succeed, Thanos said, but at the cost of the Soul Stone. It was her sacrifice that allowed me to wield it. Have you ever thought about bringing her back? Serena asked, regardless of the loss of one of the stones. She almost killed herself in an attempt to prevent me from achieving my destiny, Thanos said. Bringing her back to a world where I succeeded would destroy her emotionally. It's far more merciful to let her rest. I can't bear to bring back the person I love most, Thanos continued. But I can bring back the person you love the most, the Asgardian warrior Sif. And that is where this part ends. Well, by the time the next part comes out, Endgame will already be in theaters. I'm hoping to upload 2 videos before Endgame comes out. One will be a public video where I speculate what will and won't happen in Endgame, and how it might compare to Watched by Death. The other video will be an unlisted video, where I detail how Watched by Death will play out. That I'll make public once I get close to finishing the fan fiction. What do you think will happen in Part 9? What do you think will happen in Endgame? Thanos demands you... Actually, he doesn't appear to be in a demanding mood, does he? Anyways, please leave your thoughts in the comments section down below and subscribe to my channel. And did I mention I have a Twitter account?